The morning started like any other outside Buckingham Palace. Tourists gathered behind the black iron gates, cameras ready. Children pointed at the guards in their red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. The sun was bright. The air was warm. Everything felt normal, but Sergeant James Mitchell felt something else. He stood at his post near the main entrance, rifle at his side, face expressionless. To the tourists, he looked like a statue, unmoving, unthinking, just part of the scenery. But his eyes were working, always working, scanning faces, tracking movements, looking for the thing that didn't fit. 20-3 years in the military, 12 years as a royal guard. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. A man in the crowd caught his attention. Mid-30s dark jacket despite the heat. Hands buried in pockets. His eyes weren't on the palace. They were on the guards, calculating, measuring. James's pulse quickened, but his face stayed blank. Royal guards didn't react. They observed. They waited. They prepared. The man moved closer to the gate. His right hand stayed hidden in his jacket. His jaw was clenched. Sweat beaded on his forehead even though he stood in shade. James shifted his weight slightly. A subtle signal to Corporal Davies 20 feet away. Davies caught it immediately. 2 guards, now watching the same target. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button now because what happens next will leave you speechless. The crowd grew thicker as the changing of the guard approached. Hundreds of people pressed against the barriers. Parents lifted children onto shoulders. Phones recorded everything. The man in the dark jacket pushed through them, aggressive, determined. People muttered complaints, but moved aside. He was fixated on something. On someone. James's training kicked into high gear. His mind ran through protocols, threat assessment, response procedures, rules of engagement. But training couldn't prepare you for the moment. When everything became real, the man reached the front of the crowd. 10 feet from the gate. 15 feet from James, his hand emerged from his jacket. Time slowed. James saw the object before his conscious mind could process it. Black, cylindrical. Wires. Visible at one end, a pipe bomb. The man's thumb moved toward a button. His face twisted with something between rage and tears. His mouth opened. Words James would never forget. For my brother. For all of them. The crowd didn't understand yet. They were still filming, still smiling. Still thinking this was part of the show, but James understood. He had seconds, maybe less. His body moved before his mind finished the thought. 23 years of training compressed. Into one explosive moment, he vaulted the barrier with speed that shouldn't be possible in full ceremonial uniform. His rifle clattered to the ground. His hands reached for the bomber. The crowd gasped. Cameras swung toward him. Confusion rippled through the tourists. The bomber's eyes widened. Surprise, then fury. His thumb pressed down. Click. Nothing happened. Malfunction. Faulty detonator. Divine intervention. James would never know which, but he didn't hesitate. He crashed into the man with the full force of his body. They hit the pavement hard. The bomb flew from the bomber's hand, skittering across the concrete. Now the screaming started. People ran in every direction. Parents grabbed children. Tourists trampled each other in panic. The organized crowd became chaos in seconds. James fought to control the bomber. The man was strong, desperate. He thrashed and clawed, trying to reach the device. "Get back!" James shouted at the crowd. His voice carried authority that cut through panic. Everyone back? Now. Davies was already moving. He kicked the bomb away from the struggle toward an empty corner. Other guards swarmed in. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The bomber bucked beneath James, screaming incoherently. Spit flew from his mouth. His eyes were wild, unfocused. This wasn't a trained terrorist. This was someone broken. Someone who had chosen violence as his final statement. James pinned him down, knee in his back, hands securing his wrists. The man sobbed now, rage dissolving into despair.
My brother died in the hospital.
He screamed. They let him die. The system let him die. The words tumbled out between sobs. A tragedy James didn't know. A pain he couldn't fix. But he had stopped it from becoming a massacre. The bomb squad arrived within minutes. Officers in heavy protective gear approached the device carefully. The crowd had been pushed back 200 yards. Police tape went up. Helicopters circled overhead. James stood to the side, breathing hard, adrenaline still flooding his system. His hands shook. His uniform was torn. Blood from a scraped elbow stained his sleeve. Corporal Davies approached, face pale. That was too close, Sergeant. James nodded. He couldn't speak yet. Couldn't process what had almost happened. A tourist, an American woman, approached the police line. She held up her phone. I got it all on video, she said, voice trembling. He moved so fast. That guard saved everyone. Within an hour, that video would be uploaded. Within 2 hours, it would go viral. Within 4 hours, James Mitchell's face would be on every news channel in the world. But in this moment, he just stood there. Watching the bomb squad work, watching the bomber being led away in handcuffs, still sobbing about his brother. James thought about his own family. His wife, his 2 daughters. How close he had come to never seeing them again. And he thought about all the people who almost died today. The children who almost lost their parents. The futures that almost ended. A senior officer approached. Sergeant Mitchell. That was extraordinary. James saluted mechanically. Just doing my duty, sir? But it wasn't just duty. It was instinct, training, and something else. Something harder to name. The willingness to run toward danger when everyone else ran away. The palace gates were closed now. The changing of the guard canceled. London held its breath, waiting to understand what had happened, and somewhere in a hospital a young man had died. His brother's grief had almost killed hundreds. The day that started normal had become the day that would change everything. The interrogation room was cold and clinical. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The bomber identified as Marcus Hewitt, age 34, sat, slumped in a metal chair, hands cuffed in front of him. James watched through one-way glass. He had been asked to stay, to provide witness testimony, to help investigators understand what he saw in those crucial seconds. Detective Inspector Sarah Reynolds stood beside him, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, carrying the weight of too many cases. She studied Marcus through the glass. His brother died 3 days ago, she said quietly. Overdose. Marcus brought him to A&E. They were understaffed. Wait times were 6 hours. By the time they got to him, it was too late. James felt something twist in his chest. Not sympathy for the bomber, but recognition of how tragedy could corrupt good people. How grief could become rage. Blames the system, Reynolds continued. The NHS? The government? He wanted to make a statement. Wanted people to die so others would pay attention to the ones already dying? Twisted logic, James said. Grief isn't logical, Sergeant. Inside the interrogation room, Marcus lifted his head. His face was puffy from crying. His voice, when he spoke, was hoarse. I wasn't always like this. I had a good job, family. I was normal. Detective questioning him, a younger man named Collins, leaned forward. What changed? Everything, Marcus whispered. My brother was everything. When Mum died, we only had each other. I raised him after Dad left. I put him through school. I was there when he struggled with addiction. I got him into rehab twice. He was clean for 8 months.
Marcus' voice broke.
8 months. He was doing so well. Then one bad night. One relapse. In the hospital. They just made him wait. Like he didn't matter. Like he was disposable. James watched the man fall apart. This wasn't a terrorist. Not in the traditional sense. This was someone who had snapped. Who had let pain turn into something monstrous. So you decided to kill innocent people? Collins asked, his tone neutral. I decided to make them feel what I feel, Marcus shouted. Every person in that crowd gets to go home tonight. Gets to hug their families. Gets to live. My brother doesn't. Why should they? The logic of a broken mind, the mathematics of grief. Reynolds turned to James. The bomb was crude but functional. If that detonator had worked, we'd be looking at dozens of casualties. Maybe more. You've saved a lot of lives today. James nodded slowly. The weight of it was beginning to settle. He had trained for this scenario hundreds of times, but training was abstract. This was real. Blood and tears and consequences. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Emma. Are you okay? I saw the news. Please tell me you're okay. He typed back quickly. I'm fine. Be home soon. But he wasn't fine. His hand still shook. His mind kept replaying the moment. The click of the failed detonator. The possibilities of what could have happened if it worked. Reynolds' phone rang. She answered, listened, then hung up. The news is calling you a hero. Social media is exploding. That tourist video has 40 million views already. James closed his eyes. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to go home. Kiss his daughters goodnight. Hold his wife. Pretend the world was still safe. There's going to be press, Reynolds continued. Palace will want a statement. Probably medals. Public ceremonies. You know how this works. But it did. He had seen other guards thrust into spotlights. Seen them crumble under attention or rise to it. He wasn't sure which he would be. In the interrogation room, Marcus had his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I just wanted it to stop hurting. Collins's expression softened slightly. You need help. Professional help. What you're feeling is real, but what you've tried to do, I know. Marcus cut him off. I know it was wrong. But in that moment, I didn't care. I wanted everyone to hurt like I hurt. I wanted the world to burn.
How?
James understood that darkness better than he wanted to admit. He had seen combat, held dying friends, watched good people get destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. The difference was, he had never let that darkness win. Reynolds touched his shoulder gently. You can go, Sergeant. We have your statement. Get some rest. Rest, as if that was possible now. James left Scotland Yard as the sun began to set. Orange light painted London in soft gold. The streets were busier than usual. News vans parked on corners. People gathered around phones, watching footage of the attack. He overheard snippets of conversation as he walked to the tube station. Did you see how fast he moved? That guard is a real hero. Could have been a massacre. Hero, the word followed him like a shadow. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired, shaken, grateful to be alive. The tube was crowded, rush hour. Commuters pressed together, reading newspapers with his face on the front page. Some recognized him despite his civilian clothes. They stared but didn't approach. London courtesy. Give space, even to heroes. He got off at a stop and walked the remaining blocks to his house. A modest, semi-detached in a quiet neighborhood. Flowers in the window boxes. A bicycle in the small front yard. Normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. Emma opened the door before he reached it. She must have been watching from the window. Her face crumpled when she saw him. She ran into his arms. I thought she couldn't finish. Just held him tighter. I'm okay, he whispered into her hair. I'm here. His daughters appeared in the doorway. Sophie, age 12. Mia, age 8. They looked scared. They had never seen their mother this upset. James pulled back from Emma and knelt down. Both girls rushed to him. He wrapped them in his arms, feeling their small hearts beating against his chest. Daddy, everyone at school was talking about you, Sophie said. They said you stopped a bad man. I did. Were you scared? Mia asked, her voice tiny. He thought about lying. Thought about being the brave soldier dad who feared nothing. But that wasn't the truth they needed. I was terrified, he admitted. But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared.
Oh.
Sophie hugged him tighter. I'm glad you're okay. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They went inside. Emma made tea. The girls showed him drawings they made at school. The television stayed off. For a few hours, they pretended the outside world didn't exist. But it did exist. And tomorrow, it would come knocking. Because James Mitchell was no longer just a royal guard. He was a symbol, a hero. A man who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. And the world wanted to know everything about him as he lay in bed that night. Emma asleep beside him. James stared at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't quiet. He kept seeing Marcus's face. The desperation. The grief. The moment before everything went wrong, he thought about chance. About the detonator failing. About being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. About how thin the line was between life and death. Between hero and victim. Between a normal day and the worst day. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless. Filled with dreams of explosions that didn't happen. Of crowds that ran. Of children who almost died. When morning came, everything would be different. The world had decided who James Mitchell was. Now he had to figure out how to live with it. Morning brought chaos James wasn't prepared for. Reporters camped outside his house. News vans lined the street. Neighbors peeked through curtains, gossiping about the sudden fame on their quiet block. Emma pulled the living room curtains shut. How did they find our address? Someone always talks, James said bitterly. Someone at the station. A colleague. Doesn't matter who. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Unknown numbers. Media requests. Interview offers. Messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. The palace sent a car at 8 o'clock. Black sedan. Tinted windows. 2 protection officers who cleared a path through the reporters shouting questions. Sergeant Mitchell, how does it feel to be a hero? Would you do it again? What went through your mind? James kept his head down. Said nothing. Got into the car while cameras flashed like strobe lights. The palace felt different today. Usually, it was a workplace. Grand, yes, but familiar. Today, it felt like walking into history. The attack had happened here. On these grounds, against this symbol of British tradition, he was led to a private room where senior military officials waited. Medals on their chests. Serious expressions. They stood when he entered. General Patrick Thornton, head of Royal Security, extended his hand. Sergeant Mitchell, on behalf of the Crown, thank you. Your actions yesterday prevented a tragedy. James shook his hand. I did what any guard would do, sir. Thornton smiled slightly. Perhaps. But you were the one who did it. I debriefed him for 2 hours, asking about every detail, every decision, every second of the incident. They recorded his answers, took notes, built a complete picture. The bomber is being charged with attempted murder and terrorism offenses, Thornton explained. Crown prosecution is pushing for maximum sentencing. 25 years minimum. 25 years. Marcus would be nearly 60 when he got out. His brother's death would have cost him his entire life. How are you handling this? Thornton asked, his tone shifting. More personal. Less official, James hesitated. I'm managing, sir. That's not what I asked. The room felt smaller suddenly. All these decorated officers staring at him, waiting for honesty. I keep thinking about what could have happened, James admitted. The families, the children. I see it when I close my eyes. Thornton nodded slowly. You'll be offered counseling. I strongly recommend you take it. PTSD doesn't discriminate. Even heroes get scars.
Hero.
That word again. James was starting to hate it. There will be a ceremony, Thornton continued. The king wants to present you with a medal personally. George Cross, likely. We're coordinating with Downing Street for a joint recognition. The Prime Minister wants to meet you. James felt exhausted just hearing it. When? Next week. We'll handle all the logistics. Your family will be there. Full dress uniform. Press will cover it. More cameras. More attention. More performance of bravery when all he felt was tired. You're also being promoted, Thornton added. Effective immediately. Staff Sergeant. And you'll be reassigned. Training Division. We want you teaching the next generation of guards. James looked up sharply. I'm being taken off active duty? You're being given a position of greater responsibility. Your experience is invaluable. It felt like being sidelined. Like they wanted him visible but controlled. A symbol, not a soldier. But he nodded. Thank you, sir. After the debriefing, he was given an hour before the next appointment. He wandered the palace corridors, trying to clear his head. His footsteps echoed on polished floors. Portraits of kings and queens watched him pass. He found himself outside the chapel, small, quiet. He wasn't particularly religious, but he needed silence. Needed space to think. He sat in a pew at the back. The chapel smelled of old wood and candle wax. Light filtered through stained glass, painting colored patterns on stone. He thought about Marcus Hewitt. About grief so powerful it turned into violence. About a system so broken it let people die in waiting rooms. About how one moment of desperation almost killed hundreds. You look troubled. James turned. A chaplain stood in the doorway. Elderly man with kind eyes and a collar that marked his position, just thinking father. The chaplain walked in slowly. May I sit? James gestured to the pew. The old man settled beside him with a soft groan. I heard what you did yesterday. The whole palace is talking about it, I'm sure they are. You don't seem happy about the attention. James laughed without humor. I didn't do it for attention. I did it because someone had to. The chaplain was quiet for a moment. You know what I think separates ordinary people from extraordinary ones? Ordinary people wait for someone else to act. Extraordinary people become that someone, not extraordinary. I just reacted. Exactly. You reacted when others froze. That's instinct. That's training. That's character. James rubbed his face. The bomber Marcus wasn't evil. He was broken. His brother died and he couldn't handle it. Grief makes people do terrible things, the chaplain agreed. But it doesn't excuse them. You stopped a tragedy. That matters regardless of his pain. Does it balance out? James asked. All the good I did yesterday against the man whose life is now destroyed? The chaplain smiled sadly. That's not a scale you can balance. You're not responsible for his choices. You're only responsible for yours, and you chose to save lives. That's enough. Enough. James wanted to believe that. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. The chapel felt peaceful, removed from the chaos outside. Finally, James stood. Thank you, Father. Come back any time. Heroes need sanctuary too. James left the chapel feeling slightly lighter, not fixed, but less burdened. His next appointment was with the palace press secretary, a woman named Victoria Chen who handled media for the royal family with ruthless efficiency. She sat behind a large desk, typing rapidly on her computer. When James entered, she looked up and gestured to a chair. Sergeant Mitchell. Or should I say Staff Sergeant now? Congratulations. Thank you. Victoria pulled up several screens. We need to discuss your public image. Right now, you're the biggest story in Britain. Maybe the world. We need to manage this carefully. She clicked through news articles, videos, social media posts. His face was everywhere. Headlines ranged from respectful to sensational. Hero Guard stops palace bomber. Sergeant Mitchell, the man who saved London. Watch. Incredible moment, Royal Guard tackles terrorist. Victoria turned the screen toward him. 47 million views now. The video has been shared by every major news outlet. You're trending in 68 countries. James felt sick. I didn't ask for this. No one asked for viral fame. But we need to use it constructively. The palace wants you to do one major interview. Controlled environment. Approved journalist. Tell your story properly before the tabloids make up their own version. I don't want to do interviews. Victoria's expression softened. I understand. But silence creates a vacuum. People will fill it with speculation. Better to control the narrative. She pulled up more articles. These ones were worse. Hero Guard's secret past. Who is James Mitchell? Exclusive neighbors speak about Palace Hero. They were digging into his life, his family, his history. Nothing was private anymore. They found out about my father, James said quietly. Victoria nodded. The prison record. Yes. We were prepared to address it, if asked. James's father had been a criminal. Small-time theft that escalated to robbery. Served 8 years. Died of liver failure 2 years after release. James had spent his whole life trying to be different. Trying to prove he wasn't his father's son. Will they use it against me? Some outlets will try. Will emphasize that you chose a different path. Military service. Protecting the crown. You're proof that people can rise above their circumstances. James hated that his father's mistakes were being dragged into this. Hated that his daughters might read about a grandfather they never knew in the worst possible context. One interview, Victoria pressed. BBC primetime. We'll have editorial approval. You tell your story. Then you step back. The public will respect your privacy if we give them something genuine. James knew she was right. The story would be told with or without him. Better to tell it himself? Fine. One interview. Victoria smiled. Good. I'll set it up. As he left her office, James felt the walls closing in. His life was no longer his own. It belonged to the public now. To the story. To the narrative of heroism he never wanted to write. Outside, the sun was setting. London glowed orange and gold. Beautiful and indifferent to his struggles. Tomorrow, he would go home. Face the reporters. Prepare for the ceremony. Do the interview. Play the hero. But tonight, he just wanted to be James. Mitchell, husband, father, man who got scared and acted anyway. The car took him home through busy streets. People walked past, absorbed in their lives. Most didn't know what happened yesterday. Didn't care about palace bombers or hero guards. For them, life continued normally. James envied them. The BBC interview was scheduled for Thursday evening. Prime time. Maximum viewership. James had 3 days to prepare, which felt like too much time and not enough. Emma helped him practice answers. Sitting across from him in their kitchen, asking questions a journalist might ask. Sophie and Mia watched from the doorway, fascinated by their father's sudden importance. Why did you run toward danger? Emma asked, reading from a notepad. James thought carefully. Because standing still meant people would die. I couldn't let that happen. Good, Emma said. But add emotion. People want to feel what you felt. He tried again. Because in that moment, I saw children in the crowd. Families. People who wanted to go home that night. I couldn't stand by and let them be hurt. Sophie nodded approvingly. That's better, Dad. He smiled at his daughter. She was growing up so fast. 12 years old and already teaching him about empathy. The days passed in a blur of preparation and media management. Victoria Chen called daily with updates. Interview approved. Questions vetted. Set designed to look dignified but warm. Remember she coached during one call? You're humble, grateful, professional. You did your duty. You don't see yourself as special. But James was starting to realize the world didn't care what he saw himself as. They had decided who he was. Hero. Symbol. Example. His own perspective was irrelevant. Wednesday. Afternoon brought unexpected visitors. 3 other guards from his unit arrived at his house. Davies, Thompson, and young Corporal Harrison. They brought beer and camaraderie. They sat in James's small backyard, drinking and talking carefully around the subject everyone wanted to discuss. Finally, Davies broke the silence. How are you really doing, mate? James took a long drink. Honestly, I don't know. Everything feels surreal. You're famous now. That's got to be strange. Strange doesn't cover it. I can't go to the shops without being recognized. Sophie's friends keep asking for photos. My neighbor wants me to give a talk at their community center. Brasson, the youngest at 23, looked uncomfortable. Some of us... We feel bad. We were there too. We should have moved faster. Should have helped. James looked at him sharply. Don't do that. Don't carry guilt for doing your job correctly. You followed protocol? I broke it. You saved lives, Davies said firmly. I got lucky. If that detonator worked, I'd be dead. You all would have been dealing with casualties instead of having beers in a backyard. We're quiet. The truth hung heavy between them. The lads are calling you Captain America, Thompson said, trying to lighten the mood. James laughed despite himself. Great, that's not embarrassing at all. It's better than some of the other nicknames floating around, Davies grinned. Be grateful we're keeping those private. They talked until sunset. About football. About their families. About everything except bombs and heroism. It was exactly what James needed. A reminder that he was still one of them. Still just a guard who got lucky. After they left, Emma found him sitting in the dark backyard. You okay? She asked, sitting beside him. They made me feel normal, like I'm still me. You are still you. The world just knows about you now. James turned to her. Are you scared? About what this means for us? For the girls? Emma considered the question. A little, but I'm also proud. You did something incredible. I just wish it didn't come with all this noise. He pulled her close. When this is over, the ceremony, the interview, all of it, can we go somewhere? Just the four of us. Somewhere quiet. Scotland, Emma said immediately. That cottage we stayed at 3 years ago? Middle of nowhere. No reception. Just family. James nodded. Perfect. Thursday arrived with rain. Heavy drops that drummed against windows and turned London gray. James dressed in his full ceremonial uniform. Red tunic, black trousers, polished boots. Every button gleaming. Emma straightened his collar. You look very handsome. I look like I'm going to a funeral. Stop it. You look like a soldier, which is what you are. The car arrived at 4 o'clock. The interview was scheduled for 7, but they needed time for makeup, lighting tests, final preparations. The girls hugged him goodbye like he was going to war. The BBC studios were massive. Security everywhere. Staff rushing around with clipboards and headsets. James was led to a green room where he waited alone, watching the rain streak down windows. Victoria appeared at 6:30. Ready? No, she smiled. Good. Nervous is authentic. Just remember, honest, humble, human. You're not performing. You're sharing. The interviewer was Michael Bradshaw, a respected journalist in his 50s. He shook James's hand warmly before they took their seats in the studio. The set was simple. 2 chairs. Soft lighting. A backdrop showing Buckingham Palace at sunset. Deliberate symbolism. Bradshaw leaned forward as the cameras prepared. Thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy. Feels strange, James admitted. Just talk to me. Forget the cameras. This is a conversation. The director called for quiet. Cameras rolled. Red lights blinked on. Bradshaw began. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell. 5 days ago, you stopped a terrorist attack outside Buckingham Palace. How does it feel to be called a hero? James took a breath. Here we go. It feels overwhelming, honestly. I don't see myself as a hero. I see myself as someone who did his job in a critical moment. But you went beyond your job. You vaulted a barrier, tackled an armed bomber, risked your life. I saw a threat. I reacted. 23 years of training took over. Ajahn nodded. Walk us through that moment. What did you see? James closed his eyes briefly, remembering a man in a dark jacket, his hand in his pocket. His eyes, there was something wrong in his eyes. Desperation, rage. I knew before I saw the device. You knew he was dangerous. Yes, guards are trained to read people. Body language. Micro-expressions. He stood out. And when you saw the bomb? Time slowed. I remember thinking about the crowd, about the children, about how many people would die if that device went off. Were you afraid? James met Bradshaw's eyes. Terrified. But fear doesn't stop you when lives depend on action. The interview continued for 45 minutes. Bradshaw asked about his background, his family, his father's criminal record. James answered honestly. Talked about growing up poor, about choosing military service to escape his circumstances, about becoming a guard because he wanted to protect something bigger than himself. The bomber Marcus Hewitt, his brother, died in a hospital. He was in pain. Does that change how you see him? James considered carefully. I feel sorry for his pain, but sympathy doesn't excuse attempted murder. His brother's death was a tragedy. What he tried to do would have created dozens more. Do you think about what could have happened if the detonator worked? Every night, I see it in dreams. The explosion, the casualties, the families destroyed. How do you cope with that? I'm getting help, counseling, and I have my family. My wife Emma, my daughters Sophie and Mia, they keep me grounded. Bradshaw smiled. Your daughters must be very proud. They're scared, James said honestly. They're proud, yes, but they're also scared they could have lost me. That's hard for children to process. The interview ended with Bradshaw thanking him for his service, for his bravery, for agreeing to share his story. As the cameras stopped rolling, James felt drained, like he had run a marathon. Bradshaw shook his hand again. That was powerful. Thank you, Victoria appeared, beaming. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Authentic. Humble. Human. Exactly what we needed. James just wanted to go home. The car took him back through rainy streets. The interview would air in 2 hours. Millions would watch. His story would be dissected, analyzed, shared. But for now, he was just a man in a wet uniform going home to his family. Emma had dinner ready. Shepherd's pie. His favorite, the girls had made a banner. Welcome home, hero, Dad. He laughed when he saw it. The first real laugh in days. They ate together. Normal conversation. Sophie talked about school drama. Mia showed him a drawing she made. Emma told a story about their cat getting stuck in a neighbor's garage. Ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. At 9 o'clock, the interview aired. They watched together, the girls curled up beside James on the sofa. Seeing himself on television was surreal. He looked older on screen, more serious. The man on TV seemed confident, composed. Nothing like how James felt inside. When it ended, Sophie hugged him. You did good, Dad. Thanks, sweetheart. Sue buzzed constantly. Messages from colleagues, friends, people he hadn't heard from in years. All saying the same things. Proud, inspired. Hero Emma turned off the television. No more tonight. Tomorrow, you can deal with all that. Tonight, you're just Dad. James nodded gratefully. Just Dad sounds perfect. He tucked the girls into bed. Read them stories. Kissed their foreheads. Normal routines that felt sacred after the chaos. Later, lying in bed beside Emma, he felt some of the tension release. One more thing, Emma said in the darkness. The ceremony. And then Scotland. Away from all this. Can't wait.
Me neither.
I want my husband back. Not the hero. Just you. James pulled her close. I'm still here. Under all the noise. Still me. But he wondered if that was true. If something had changed fundamentally. If you could go through what he went through and come out the same person. Outside, rain continued falling. London slept. And somewhere in a prison cell, Marcus Hewitt stared at walls, grieving his brother and his freedom. 2 lives forever changed by one terrible moment. Tomorrow would bring the medal ceremony, more cameras, more performance. But tonight, James Mitchell was just a man grateful to be alive, and that would have to be enough. The ceremony was held at Windsor Castle on a bright Saturday morning. Blue sky, crisp autumn air. The kind of day that photographers dream about. James arrived early with his family. Emma wore a navy dress. Sophie and Mia were in matching floral outfits, nervous and excited. They had never been inside a royal residence before. Security screened them thoroughly. Then escorts led them through corridors filled with paintings and history. Mia held James's hand tightly, overwhelmed by the grandeur. Dad, is the king really going to be here? She whispered. Yes, sweetheart. What do we say to him? Your Majesty? And you curtsy? Like we practiced. They were shown to a waiting room with about 30 other people. Family members of other honorees, officials, military brass, everyone in formal dress, speaking in hushed tones. Davies, Thompson, and Harrison were there in full uniform. They would receive commendations for their response. Lesser honors than James's George Cross, but recognition nonetheless. Davies caught James's eye and gave a subtle nod. James nodded back. No words needed. At precisely 10 o'clock, they were led into the throne room. Massive space. Vaulted ceiling. Crimson carpet. Throne at the far end, under a golden canopy. Rows of chairs faced the throne. Press photographers lined one wall, cameras ready. James's stomach churned. He hated being the center of attention. Emma squeezed his hand as they took their seats in the front row. Breathe. You've got this. Music played softly. Then doors opened, and palace officials entered. Finally, preceded by 2 guards, the king arrived. Everyone stood. The king walked to his throne with measured steps. He was smaller than James expected, more human. But the weight of centuries showed in his bearing. The ceremony began with other honors. A scientist who pioneered cancer treatment, a teacher who transformed a failing school, a firefighter who saved a family from a burning building. Each person approached the throne, bowed or curtsied, received their medal and a few private words from the king, then retreated. Finally, James's name was called. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, for extraordinary courage and devotion to duty in the face of imminent danger. James walked forward. His boots echoed on polished floor. He was aware of hundreds of eyes watching, cameras clicking. History being recorded, he stopped before the king and bowed. The king regarded him with steady eyes. Sergeant Mitchell, what you did was remarkable. You exemplified the very best of British service. Thank you, Your Majesty. King pinned the George Cross to James's uniform. Heavy metal. Silver cross with a blue ribbon. One of the highest honors for civilian gallantry. How are you managing? The king asked quietly. The attention must be difficult. James was surprised by the personal question. It's challenging, sir. But I'm managing. The king smiled slightly. I understand something of unwanted attention. It comes with certain responsibilities. But remember, you're not alone. Your brothers in arms stand with you, yes, Your Majesty. The king extended his hand. James shook it. Firm grip. Brief but genuine.
Thank you for your service.
For your courage. And for reminding us all what duty truly means. James stepped back, bowed again, and returned to his seat. Emma's eyes were wet with tears. Sophie and Mia looked awed. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Champagne connapes. Important people making small talk. The Prime Minister found James in the crowd. She shook his hand enthusiastically for the cameras. You've done the nation proud, Sergeant. We're in your debt. Just doing my duty, ma'am, nevertheless. If there's anything you need support, resources, my office is available. James nodded politely. Political theater. He understood the game. A veteran approached him. Older man, 80s probably. Distinguished Service Order on his lapel. Korean War, the man said, gesturing to his medal. I know what it's like. The attention. The pressure. Everyone wanting a piece of you. How did you handle it? James asked. Poorly at first. Drank too much. Pushed people away. Took years to find balance. The veteran looked at him seriously. Don't make my mistakes. Accept the help. Talk to your mates. Don't carry it alone. I'll try. You'll do more than try. You've got a family. That's your anchor. Hold on to them. The reception lasted 2 hours. James shook countless hands, posed for dozens of photos, answered the same questions repeatedly. How does it feel? Overwhelming? Would you do it again? Without hesitation? What's next? Rest, family, returning to duty. By the time they left, he was exhausted. The girls had behaved perfectly, but were clearly tired. Emma looked ready to collapse. They had lunch at a quiet pub outside Windsor. Fish and chips. Ordinary food after an extraordinary morning. You were amazing, Emma said. So composed, I felt like an imposter. You're not. You earned that medal. Sophie reached across the table and touched the George Cross on his uniform. Can I wear it sometime? James smiled. When you're older, it's heavy. Like responsibility, Mia said seriously. Everyone looked at her. 8 years old and already wise beyond her years. Exactly like responsibility, James agreed. They drove home as afternoon faded. The girls fell asleep in the back seat. Emma held James's hand across the center console. 3 days, she said. Then Scotland. Then we get our lives back. Can't wait. But James knew their lives would never be exactly the same. The ceremony had cemented his place in history. The George Cross meant he would forever be that guard who stopped the bomber. He could live with it. He would have to. That evening, after the girls were in bed, James sat in his backyard. Cool night air. Stars visible despite London's light pollution. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Marcus's mother. I saw the ceremony on television. I wanted to say thank you. My son did a terrible thing. He was in pain, but that doesn't excuse it. You saved lives. You stopped him from becoming a murderer. I'm grateful. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know some of us understand what you did. James read the message 3 times. He didn't know how to respond. Didn't know if he should respond. Finally, he typed, "Thank you for reaching out. I hope your family finds peace." He sent it before he could reconsider. Her reply came quickly. "I hope you do too." James looked up at the stars. Thought about Marcus in prison. About a mother who lost both her sons, one to death, one to his own actions. About the ripples of tragedy spreading outward, touching everyone. He thought about the bomber's brother, the man who died in a hospital waiting room. Another casualty of a broken system. His death had sparked all this. Without it, Marcus would still be free. James would still be anonymous. Hundreds of people at the palace would have continued their day unaware of how close they came to disaster. One death. So many consequences. Emma appeared in the doorway. "Come to bed. You need rest. In a minute." She came outside and sat beside him. They didn't speak. Just sat together, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood. "I'm proud of you," Emma said finally. Not for the medal. Not for the heroics. For still being kind. For still caring about that woman's message. A lot of men would have become bitter. I'm not bitter. Just tired. Tired is allowed. You've earned it. They went inside together. James took off his uniform carefully. Hung it in the closet. The George Cross gleamed in the dim light. Tomorrow, the newspapers would run stories about the ceremony. Social media would explode with photos and commentary. His life would continue being public property, but tonight he was just a husband climbing into bed beside his wife. Just a father who would wake up to make his daughter's breakfast. Just a man who did something brave and now had to live with being extraordinary. Sleep came easier than the previous nights. No nightmares. No replaying of the attack. Just deep, dreamless rest. In the morning, Sophie jumped on the bed. "Dad, wake up! You're famous again?" She held out her phone. The ceremony photos were everywhere. James shaking the king's hand, the George Cross pinned to his chest, his family watching proudly. The headlines were predictable. Hero Guard honored by King. George Cross for Palace bomber hero Mitchell receives Britain's highest honor, James groaned. More attention. Wonderful. At least it's positive, Emma said, taking the phone from Sophie. "Can we go to Scotland now?" Mia asked from the doorway. "I'm tired of strangers." James laughed. "Me too, sweetheart. 3 more days." Those 3 days crawled. More interviews. Thank you messages to respond to. A visit to his old school, where he spoke to students about service and courage. The school visit was hardest. Standing in front of children who looked at him like he was superhuman, trying to explain that heroes were just ordinary people who made a choice. Anyone can be brave, he told them. Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and acting anyway. Small boy raised his hand. But what if you're not strong enough? James knelt down to his level. Bravery comes in many forms. Sometimes it's running toward danger. Sometimes it's standing up to a bully. Sometimes it's just being kind when everyone else is mean. You're stronger than you think. The boy smiled. James hoped the words helped. Hoped he was giving them something real, not just platitudes. Finally, the day came. Early Monday morning. They packed the car with bags and supplies, locked up the house, left the chaos of London behind. The drive north took 8 hours. Motorways gave way to roads, then narrow lanes, then a single-track road that wound through empty highlands. The cottage appeared as the sun began to set. Stone walls, slate roof, surrounded by heather-covered hills. No neighbors for miles. Perfect isolation. They unloaded the car as darkness fell. The cottage smelled of peat and old wood. No television. No internet. Just quiet. James stood outside under a sky filled with more stars than he had ever seen. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. Emma joined him, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like I can finally breathe." "Good. Because for the next week, you're not Staff Sergeant Mitchell. You're not a hero. You're just my husband. The girl's dad. A man on holiday?" James pulled her close. "I can live with that. Tomorrow would bring walks in the hills. Card games by the fire. Laughter with his daughters. Normalcy. Tonight he was free. The week in Scotland passed like a dream. Long walks through purple heather. Mornings spent fishing in cold streams. Evenings around a crackling fire while rain drummed on the roof. Sophie and Mia ran wild in a way London never allowed. Climbing rocks. Chasing sheep. Coming home muddy and exhausted and happy. Emma relaxed in a way she hadn't in months. No schedules. No reporters. No watching every word to protect their privacy. James felt pieces of himself returning. The constant tension in his shoulders eased. The hypervigilance faded. He slept through the night without dreams of explosions. On the 4th day, they hiked to a summit. 2 hours of steady climbing. The girls complained, but persisted. At the top, they sat on ancient stones and ate sandwiches while looking out over endless mountains. Sophie said suddenly, "Do you think about him? The bomber?" James was surprised by the question. "Sometimes. Why?" "I heard Mom talking about his brother. About why he did it. It made me sad. It should make you sad. It's a sad story. But he tried to hurt people. Including you." James chose his words carefully. People aren't simple. They can be victims and villains at the same time. Marcus lost someone he loved. That pain made him do something terrible. Both things are true. Mia, who had been quiet, spoke up. But you stopped him. So the story doesn't have to be all sad. James smiled at his youngest daughter. "You're right. Some good came from it. People lived who might have died. That matters." "Do you think he's sorry?" Sophie asked. I think he's probably very sorry. But sorry doesn't undo what he tried to do." They sat in contemplative silence. Then Emma stood and clapped her hands. "Enough heavy talk. Last one down the mountain makes dinner." The girls shrieked and ran, their laughter echoing across the hills. On the 6th day, James finally turned on his phone. It had been off since they arrived. The notifications flooded in. Hundreds of messages, emails, missed calls. He scrolled through them briefly. Most were congratulations. Some were interview requests. A few were from the palace about his new training position. One message stood out. From Detective Inspector Reynolds. "Marcus Hewitt's trial is scheduled for next month. Crown prosecution will need you to testify. Formality, really, the evidence is overwhelming. But required. Sorry to intrude on your leave. Hope you're finding peace." James stared at the message. A trial meant facing Marcus again. Meant reliving the incident in court? Meant more media attention? He sighed and put the phone away. Tomorrow's problem. Emma found him staring out the window. What's wrong? Nothing. Just reality checking in. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. One more day. Then we go back. But we've had this. These 7 days. Nobody can take them from us. You're right. That night, they let the girls stay up late. Taught them constellations. Told stories. Made memories to carry back to the real world. Mia fell asleep in James's arms. He carried her to bed, tucking the blanket around her small body. She looked peaceful, innocent, untouched by the darkness her father had seen. He wanted to keep her that way forever. Keep both his daughters safe from a world that produced bombers and heroes and grief-stricken mothers. But he couldn't. The best he could do was teach them to be strong, to be kind, to choose courage when it mattered. The drive back to London felt too short. The motorway pulled them back toward chaos, toward responsibilities, toward the life they had briefly escaped. The house felt different when they returned. Smaller, more exposed. The neighbors waved enthusiastically. The street felt less private. James's new position started Monday. Training division at Wellington Barracks. Teaching new recruits. Sharing knowledge with the next generation. It was good work. Important work. But it felt like being put out to pasture. Like the army was saying, "You've done enough. Now let others take the risk." His first day back was surreal. Walking into the barracks in civilian clothes, no longer a frontline guard. Now an instructor. The recruits stared at him. Everyone knew his story. Everyone had seen the videos. He was a legend walking among them. "All right," he said to the class of 20 young faces. "I'm Staff Sergeant Mitchell. I'll be teaching threat assessment and rapid response. But first, let's get something out of the way. Yes, that happened. Yes, I stopped it. No, I'm not special. I just applied training. Training you're about to receive." A hand went up. Young man, barely 20. "Sir, weren't you scared?" "Terrified. Fear is normal. What matters is what you do with it. You can freeze, or you can channel it into action. We're going to teach you how to channel it." The weeks passed into months. James found his rhythm as an instructor. The work was satisfying. Seeing young soldiers grow, watching them master skills that might save lives someday, the nightmares had mostly stopped. Counseling helped, so did time. The sharp edges of trauma dulled into manageable memories. Marcus Hewitt's trial came in November. Cold, gray day. Old Bailey Courthouse. James wore his dress uniform and testified for 3 hours. He described what he saw, what he did, what he thought in those critical seconds. The defense attorney tried to paint Marcus as mentally ill. As someone broken by grief and system failure, James didn't disagree. He was clearly in pain. But pain doesn't give you the right to hurt others. He made a choice. A terrible choice. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus received 28 years. He would be 62 when released. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he looked at James. No hatred. No anger. Just empty resignation. James wondered what he saw. Did Marcus regret his actions? Or did he regret getting caught? Would prison rehabilitate him, or just warehouse him? Questions without answers. Outside the courthouse, Emma waited with the girls. They had come to support him, to show solidarity. "How do you feel?" Emma asked. "Relieved it's over. Sad that any of it happened." Went home. Life continued. Winter came. Christmas arrived. James's parents-in-law visited. Normal family chaos. Presents and laughter, and too much food. On New Year's Eve, the family stayed up to watch fireworks from their backyard. As midnight struck and color exploded across the London sky, James felt Emma slip her hand into his. "This year was insane," she said. Understatement, but we made it through. Together. James pulled her close. Together. Sophie and Mia danced in the garden, sparklers drawing patterns in the darkness. Their laughter rang out clear and pure. January brought a letter. Official Palace Stationery. James opened it at the kitchen table. It was from the king's private secretary. A personal note thanking him again for his service. And an invitation to a private dinner at Clarence House in March. Just James and a small group of other honored service members. Emma read over his shoulder. Will you go? I think so. It's an honor. Look at you. Dining with royalty. My humble husband. James laughed. I'm still the same person who burns toast and can't fold fitted sheets. That's why I love you. Work continued at the barracks. James developed a reputation as a tough but fair instructor. He pushed his recruits hard but always explained why. Always connected training to real-world scenarios. Some of them would face situations like he did. Some might have to make split-second decisions with lives in the balance. He wanted them ready. One recruit, a young woman named Private Chen, stayed after class one day. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. When you ran at the bomber, how did you know it would work? How did you know you'd succeed? James considered the question. I didn't. I had no idea if I'd succeed. I just knew I had to try. Sometimes that's all you have. The willingness to try when the outcome is uncertain. What if you'd failed? Then I'd have failed trying. Better than not trying and living with that regret? Chen nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. That helps. After she left, James sat in the empty classroom. So many young people looking for guidance, looking for certainty in an uncertain world. He couldn't give them certainty. Nobody could, but he could give them tools, skills, confidence. Maybe that was enough. March arrived with unexpected warmth. Spring came early, painting London in cherry blossoms and daffodils. The dinner at Clarence House was intimate. 12 people total. Veterans, emergency responders, ordinary citizens who did extraordinary things. James sat between a firefighter who saved 6 children and a doctor who pioneered a new surgical technique. The king moved from guest to guest, asking questions, listening intently. When he reached James, they spoke for 15 minutes. About family. About the challenges of public attention. About finding meaning and service. You've handled this remarkably well, the king said. Many people would have crumbled under such scrutiny. I had good support, Your Majesty. My family kept me grounded. Family is everything. Never forget that. The crown is important. Duty is important. But family is what sustains you. James thought about his own daughters, about Emma, about the ordinary moments that mattered more than medals or ceremonies. I won't forget, sir. Driving home that night, James felt something shift inside him. A final piece falling into place. He wasn't running from the attention anymore. Wasn't fighting against being called a hero. He was just living. Being a husband and father, teaching young soldiers. Existing in the space between extraordinary and ordinary. Emma was awake when he got home. How was it? Good, surprisingly normal. What did you talk about? Family service. The king is more human than people think. Emma smiled. So are you. They went to bed. James fell asleep quickly, peacefully. No nightmares. No replaying of trauma. Just rest. Summer came. The anniversary of the attack arrived. Media wanted interviews. James politely declined. He had nothing new to say. Instead, he and Emma took the girls to the coast. Spent a week in Brighton, swimming, building sandcastles, being anonymous among tourists who had moved on to other stories. On the beach, watching his daughters play in the waves, James realized something profound. The attack had defined him for a while, but it wouldn't define him forever. He was more than one moment, more than one decision. He was a lifetime of choices, experiences, relationships. The bombing was part of his story, but it wasn't the whole story. Mia ran up to him, dripping wet and grinning. Dad, come in the water? It's perfect. James stood, brushed off sand, and chased his daughter into the waves. Sophie and Emma joined them. They splashed and laughed like any ordinary family, because that's what they were. Ordinary people who survived something extraordinary and then chose to keep living, keep loving, keep being present. As the sun set over the ocean, painting everything gold and orange, James felt truly at peace. The weight he'd carried for so long had finally lifted. He was Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, Royal Guard, instructor, hero, if people insisted. But mostly, he was just a man who loved his family, who did his job, who tried his best to be good in a complicated world. That was enough. It had always been enough. The waves rolled in endlessly. Children played on the shore. Life continued, beautiful and fragile and worth protecting, worth running toward danger for, worth every sacrifice. As they walked back to their hotel, Emma slipped her hand into his. No words needed, just connection, understanding, love. Tomorrow, they would return to London, to work and responsibilities, to the life they had built together. But tonight, they were just a family on holiday, making memories, choosing joy. And for James Mitchell, that was the greatest victory of all. Not stopping a bomber, not receiving a medal, not becoming famous, but surviving with his humanity intact, his family intact, his capacity for love and hope and ordinary happiness intact. The attack tried to break him. The attention tried to change him, but he remained himself, flawed and human and trying his best. And in the end, that was the real story worth telling. Not how he became a hero, but how he stayed human after heroism, how he chose every day to keep being the man his daughters could be proud of, the husband Emma deserved, the instructor his recruits needed. Not perfect, just present, just trying, just enough.